Hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Kinderly webinar on a loving pedagogy, the place of love in the early years. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Tracy and I'm your host for this evening. I'm delighted to be joined today by Tamsin Grimmer, for whom this topic is an absolute passion, so I know it's going to be a very inspiring session. Anyway, it's great to have Tamsin with us because of her wealth of experience in the early years. She's been a childminder, an early years teacher, a Senko, local authority advisor, and more recently, an early years consultant, university lecturer, and author, of which I'm sure she will tell you about in a moment or so. So welcome, Tamsin.
Okay, well, it's absolutely wonderful to be here. And I have to say, this is the biggest audience I have ever spoken to. So thank you so much. I'm quite impressed that so many people are interested. So thank you so much for dipping in this evening. It will be recorded, so just like all the other Kinderly webinars, so there will be the opportunity to hopefully share it with colleagues and things like that. So it's really lovely that Tracy's invited me to speak with you all this evening. So what I'm going to hopefully cover, I've got a lot packed in, so we'll see how far we get. What I'm going to cover is what I actually mean by a loving pedagogy. So we're going to think about defining love to a certain extent, but we're going to look at how we can speak the same love language as our children and think about how we can develop a loving pedagogy. And towards the end, we'll be looking at how it might be slightly different at the moment. Obviously, we're during a global pandemic at the moment, so it seems like a bit of an odd time to be thinking about love. But anyway, it's great. There's never a bad time to be thinking about love. And hopefully you're also going to have the chance to reflect on your own practice tonight as well. So that is the plan. Okay. So I'm going to start with you. Okay, you make a difference to the children in your care. So we're in the middle of this pandemic at the moment, and it's easy sometimes to feel a little bit down or a little bit low. We might be worried about some of the changes in our settings at the moment, and perhaps even in education as a whole. So it's easy to feel a bit glum at times. But I really want to encourage you. Early childhood makes an incredible amount of difference to the children and the families that you're working with. We know that early intervention really does work. So thank you for everything that you do for the children. You really are making a difference. And what you're doing is keeping the children central to your practice, keeping the families central to our provision. And you're including individuals, you're looking at their well-being, especially at the moment, and you're thinking about your provision holistically. And in a way, that's what I mean by developing a loving pedagogy. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today. So to start off with then, what do we mean by pedagogy? So hopefully you have some pen and paper handy, or you're welcome to use the chat facility. If you can, try and define pedagogy. What do you think we're talking about when you hear that term, pedagogy? So I'll just give you a moment to think about that.
Can you see some of the replies there, Tamsin, or would you like me to read them out?
Thank you, I can. That's great.
Okay, great. I'm so embarrassed about getting your name wrong. I don't think I've done that before, but
that's okay.
Slipped out. My apologies.
Well, no, it's fine, Tracy. Well, we're on that note. I've got 3 girls, and my husband was always saying we should have called them Yasmin, Jasmine, and Tasmin, because it would have been everyone. But anyway, glad we didn't. You'll be pleased to know. Not
Lots of good answers there.
But it would have been very confusing. So, wow, that's amazing. We've got hundreds of replies now. So lots of people are sort of suggesting it's about teaching or an approach to learning, or the way, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Where you're scaffolding the children. Some people have talked about curriculum or education. So thank you so much for that. The word pedagogy comes from the Greek. So forgive my Greek, I think it's pedagogio. That's possibly correct. I don't know. Anyway, it means to lead a child. So for me, the image that I've chosen here is about a child who's sort of being loosely led by the adult there. So I really quite like that, because it isn't too directive. It's not too too authoritarian. The adult is loosely holding the child's hand. For me, it looks like scaffolding. It looks like presenting the child with their own opportunity. If they wanted to, they could go in a different direction. And although it's called leading a child, I almost feel like the child can take over that lead at any moment. So he's gently holding her hands, not too tight, enough to guide her if she needs it, loose enough to allow that degree of freedom. So that, for me, as an image, is about pedagogy. So it is, if we're looking at definitions, it's the instruction of teachers or teaching, it's the science of education or the art or the craft of education, whatever phrase you want to use. It's also those philosophical beliefs that underpin our rationale for education. And you could also look at it in terms of our provision, what we're providing, perhaps looking at our learning environments for play and exploration as well. So the term pedagogy tends to be used to mean this philosophy or approach that's underpinning what we're doing. And when I'm talking about teachers tonight, I'm talking about all of us. I'm not talking about a specific qualification. I'm talking about adults who work with young children. We are all teaching young children. So pedagogy is thinking about what we do as pedagogues or as teachers to lead the children. The teaching strategies you're employing, tapping into children's interests and fascinations, taking into consideration their needs, any schemas you might identify, their background, the strengths of your children, all of these things. Using that information then to provide for them. So the learning environment you're providing, the ethos that you're fostering, because that's also leading our children. And so by using the phrase loving pedagogy, I'm trying to combine those caring aspects of our role and describe an approach to working with young children that can actually underpin all elements of our provision. So my first point, I suppose, is that our pedagogy needs to be underpinned by our ethos and values. And what we need to be thinking about here is reflecting upon our setting and thinking, for example, is there a hidden curriculum here? So what do I mean by that? Well, curriculum, you could think of that in terms of what you intend children to learn. And actually, it's also about what we offer them in practice. So what they're actually receiving in practice. So what are the children getting out of it? How are they responding to it? Are they learning? What are they learning? We've also got this hidden curriculum, and these are the messages that children are receiving through the way that we're doing things. Sometimes it's the things we don't say, so it could be quite implicit. So messages that are tied up with our ethos and our values and our practices. So I'll give you an example of this from a practical situation. I was asked into a reception class to support the teacher who was new to the early years foundation stage, and the school had a nursery class on site as well. In the nursery, the way that everything was set up, they had, for example, everything was at the child's level and the children could access what they wanted when they wanted. So if I take painting as an example, they had some easels set up, they had large sheets of paper that were in a drawer facility that the children could go and collect for themselves. The paper was held onto the easels by big bulldog clips, and the children were able to clip those. They were big plastic ones actually, but they could use them themselves. They also had powder paints, and they had them measured out into lots of little pots, and they had tiny little jugs with water. They had spoons, they had paintbrushes, and it was almost like everything was available to the children. The children knew the routine, they knew they could go there and choose what they wanted, take it back to the easel, mix their paints. They had some palettes for mixing in. So everything was kind of set up in such a way that it enabled the children to independently access the painting materials. So that was in the nursery class. In the reception class, it looked slightly different. They still had lots of things available to the children. They actually had beautifully labelled drawers with pictures and words, and it looked rather lovely. But for some reason, the children were never accessing the paint or the messy play sort of materials that were available. And there were quite a lot of things that they, in theory, could use. And we had a discussion, the reception teacher and I had a discussion about this, and I kind of was asking about, you know, why I didn't really see children using these materials. And so I started chatting with the children, and I asked them what they enjoyed about, you know, their classroom and the things they enjoyed to do. And have you got a messy play area? Are you able to do painting or Play-Doh or play with gloop and things? Oh no, we're not allowed to do that here. We do it in nursery. Oh, I said, that's interesting. You're not allowed to do it here. No, we're not allowed to do that here. And I went to another child. No, not allowed to paint in this class. And sort of went round, and this message somehow never ever been told to the children, but the children had picked up this message that they weren't allowed to paint. So where had this come from? Well, actually, it was such a simple thing. Basically, everything was in the drawers. And so the children had never been shown that they were allowed to go and open a drawer, beautifully labelled with the picture and the words. The children didn't know that they could go and open a drawer and actually access all of these things, because they'd moved from an environment where everything was out. They didn't need drawers in the nursery because everything was accessible, to a reception class where they had things in the drawers. And so all it took was one afternoon of group by group going round with the children and saying, look, in this area you have all of these things available. Now let's think, if we wanted to paint, what might we need? And then we had a look in the drawers, and we opened the drawers and we saw that there were the paint pots and the palettes and the brushes, and over there was the paper, and you know, this was how we could set it up. And of course, after a very short time, the children realized, oh, we are allowed to paint. And very, very quickly, the area became lovely and messy again, which is obviously how it was designed to be. But the hidden curriculum there was that they weren't allowed to. The children needed an ethos of permission. They needed to know that they could before they would, if that makes sense. So try and reflect on your setting and think, are there any hidden curriculums here going on? And make sure that your ethos and your values underpin your practice. And all of that, in theory, informs your policy, because your policy should be the written down version of what you do and why you do it. So the policy shouldn't be different at all to actually what you're doing in practice, and the reasons, that the ethos and the values that are underpinning that as well. So what's love got to do with all of this? Well, I'm going to quote Sonia Maidstone-Cotton. So many of you might have heard her speak a week or so ago, a few weeks ago, in fact, about well-being. And she sees the whole start of well-being as helping children to know that they are loved, that they're special, and that they're unique individuals. And that's the bottom line for me. And Maslow includes to love and be loved as a basic desire. So you've probably come across his hierarchy of human needs. And most of us would agree that loving and feeling loved are really important aspects of our lives. We tend to seek out social interaction. Babies seek it out from birth. And developing relationships from our earliest days, it's a vitally important part of development, isn't it? And so despite most people accepting that love is a basic human need, it's rarely talked about in our settings. And actually, I think we do love the children in our care. We have a professional love for them. And so what I'm going to do now, just very briefly, is explain where my interest in this area came from. So several years ago, I first came upon some work by Jules Page, who you may also have read lots of her research. She was looking at if mothers want us as professional educators to love their children. And I was particularly inspired by this because I'd recently become a mother at that point, and I was thinking more and more about this topic. I was thinking about my daughter's practitioners. Would I want them to love her? And for me, it was, and it remains, a resounding yes. I definitely want my children's educators to love my children. In fact, I'd be quite insulted if they don't. I'd think, what's wrong with my children that you can't love them? And I began to reflect upon my own experience as an educator. And I'd taught young children in schools at this point, but I was at that moment working as a childminder when my children were very young. And that allows for an even closer relationship than perhaps you might have in some schools. And I can honestly tell you that I had a really deep sense of care and affection for the children I was caring for. And I would and do describe that as love. So I would have been absolutely devastated if anything had happened to any of those children. I had a lot invested in them emotionally. And in a similar way, I used to feel bereft when the children in my class moved up to year one when I was a reception teacher. And is that the same love as I feel for my own children? No, actually, it's not. But that doesn't make it any less or any less important, and it certainly doesn't make it any less loving. It's just different. So I had all of these thoughts around professional love, and I also, at the same time, was exploring the love I have for my own children as a mother. And I read this book, which was aimed at parents, and it's about love languages. And for me, this links beautifully with attunement. And it's the idea that children, well, all of us, in fact, have different ways that we like to give and receive love, as if we have different languages, really. So if you think about it, there was an advert several years ago in the UK, which was, I think it was on the television near Valentine's Day, and it was something like, nothing says I love you like red roses, something like that. And obviously for some people, roses was a statement of undying love. And so, you know, that's absolutely great, but somebody else might say, oh, no, roses, that's way too extravagant. Actually, I would just like to spend the evening with my partner. You know, that would suit me. And, you know, someone else might say, I might say, oh, I'd rather he clean the house, thank you. That would be a better statement of undying love than a dozen red roses. So everybody has different ways that they perhaps feel love and give love as well. So I'm going to look at these different ways. So these people have come up with 5 love languages, and I'm going to unpick those a little bit later on in this talk. But first of all, Tracy's already said, I'm just going to do a quick advert, so I hope you'll forgive me for this. But I am writing a book as we speak, literally. I'm writing part of a chapter today. And I've been exploring all of these issues for quite a long time. And these two ideas that I've talked about, both the love languages and the professional love elements that Jules Page has spent her career researching, that all for me pieced together into something. I didn't quite know what, but it inspired me to go and do a master's degree. And then I researched this as my sort of master's dissertation. So, and it was my reason for doing a master's in the first place, but then it was brilliant, because it was like all of these ideas knitted together into this wonderful tapestry. And I already have a very strong interest in following up on children's interests and fascinations and linking with emotional development. These are both kind of really key areas that I feel invested in. And for me, this whole idea around loving pedagogy, it's almost like this is where it all fits together. So my dissertation title was, "Is there a place for love in an early childhood setting?" And you'll not be surprised to find that I concluded that there certainly was a place for love. And what I was actually doing was looking at how love unfolds in a setting. And I interviewed practitioners, and I observed the children, and I kind of matched them up and discussed how we can define love, and looked at how love might look in practice in a professional setting. So this led me on then to write this particular book. So I sent a proposal in to Routledge, and thankfully they've accepted. So this is due out in, hopefully, if I can finish writing it, in spring 2021. So it does draw upon my research, but it also looks at all these other things I'm talking about today. So theory and literature, and lots of case studies, stories, anecdotes, some beautiful photographs that people are very kindly sharing with me, and things that I've gathered over the last few years. So do watch this space, and I know Tracy and Kinderly will keep you in touch about that as well. So there's a wealth of research, of course, that talks about attachment. So this is not new. The importance of developing secure attachments. This is an area that there's been a lot of research looking at. And within early childhood, we've established systems which are rooted in attachment theory, and quite rightly so. So, for example, the ideas around a key person approach, and the idea, that one particular adult needs to build that bond with the family and with the children, and oversee the children's needs, helping them to feel safe, secure, cared for, I would say loved. So this isn't new. But how about policy? Well, I appreciate we have lots of people from around the world joining us today, but in the UK, or in England in particular, it's not there. So sorry to disappoint, but actually it's worse than that in England. So those of you that are English today, or are working in English settings, the term loving has been removed from policy. So it used to be there, and it's no longer there. Early education did try and keep it there. So in development matters, it's still, they retained, positive relationships as warm and loving. So that was still mentioned. That's a non-statutory guidance document that we have. In the statutory bit that the government have provided us, it's not there. The good news is I've chatted with one of the people who's responsible for the new non-statutory guidance bit, and actually loving relationship is mentioned in the new development matters that's due to be coming out over the next year or so. So that's some good news. I haven't seen it in writing, but I've been told by a colleague who's been working on it. So that's the good news. Anyway, it's thankfully there in some other countries as well. So if you're not from England here today, then you might want to look into your own. I'd be really interested, actually, if you wanted to let me know if your actual policy documents mention love. So why do we need to be thinking about a loving pedagogy? What's really important about it? Well, for me, it's really important because I believe that young children have a right to be loved and to feel loved. Young children are spending a vast amount of time in our childhood settings, and sometimes it's even a bigger proportion of their waking lives than they spend at home. So actually, it's really important to develop this loving pedagogy. It's empowering to them. It offers them a voice, which obviously is really important. It's holding children in mind, so it's making sure that their best interests are prioritised. It gives us permission as educators to perhaps act in a way that we want to act with the children. It's reiterating to parents that we care for their children very deeply, which obviously is really important as well. I believe it makes our workplaces much happier places because it's looking at well-being and making sure that everyone's well-being, both the children and the staff, are given a very high priority. And I feel that it really positively impacts the children's lives. So that's sort of a really important thing. So what we're going to do next is think a little bit about what this can look like in practice. Okay, so first of all, it's your turn. I've been talking for a little while. I want you to think about someone who loves you. How do you know that they love you? Okay, and think about someone that you love. How do they know that you love them? Okay, so you can either jot down your ideas if you've got pen and paper with you, or do type them in the chat. So think of someone who loves you. How do you know they love you? And think of someone you love. How do they know that you love them? Wow, loads of ideas coming here. And that's really interesting because lots of people, I like that, put up with me, that was a good one. So lots of people, we've got things like hugs and things that you would expect on there, but we've got about spending time together. We've got actions, we've got doing things for each other, being interested in the things you're interested in, listening to each other. So, oh, thank you for that about Scotland. I'll look that up. Thank you. So, wow, what wonderful ideas we have. Thank you. So, this is leading me on to the idea that we all have different ways that we like to give and receive love. Okay. And those of you that are parents out there, you might want to ask this question of your children. How do you know that I love you? And their answer might be interesting. So these guys, Chapman and Campbell, they identified 5 main love languages. Now they've written extensively, especially Gary Chapman, I think, they've written a lot about other relationships. So the one that I'm quoting is in relation to children. They've also, in relation to the parent-child relationship, they've also talked a lot about an adult partnership. So perhaps like a marriage or that sort of civil partnership type of relationship. So they've written books around that. And they've also written about love languages in school. So a teacher-child relationship. They haven't written about sort of in an early years context. They're writing in the US, so children start school at about age 6 over there. So it's sort of slightly older children than we have. But what they've done is they've asked those questions. How do you know that your mum loves you? Or how do you know that your brother loves you? Or whatever it might be. And they've from their research, they've identified that there are 5 main ways that people like to give and receive love. Okay, so words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, receiving gifts, acts of service. We're going to go into these in a few minutes, and I'll try and sort of look at those in a tiny bit more detail. But basically, the idea is we've all got different ways we like to give and receive love. So, for example, if a child is constantly told by their mother, I love you, but their mother doesn't actually ever have time to spend with them, and their primary language is quality time, they might not feel loved. I'm afraid that's one very close to my heart, because I always feel like I'm being pulled in lots of different directions and don't have enough time to spend with the children. So likewise, you know, if a parent prefers not to kiss and cuddle their child, even if they spend loads of time with their child, if their child's primary love language is actually physical touch, their child may not feel very loved. So I was considering these ideas in the context of early years and thinking, if we could better understand our children and how they prefer to be loved, we can actually better understand how to relate to them and do it more appropriately, and therefore help them to feel more loved. So I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do now is just flick on through these and give you some examples. I'm very conscious that I shall run out of time. So the first one, demonstrating love through words, words of affirmation. Things like, you know, do we pick up on when children use words to express themselves? Now, usually younger children don't tend to use words as much, and we're kind of encouraging them to use words, but there are some children that really do use words. And there was one little girl, and I'm just going to quote this. So there was a little girl at Headington Quarry Nursery School, and she said, I love you, to one of the adults. I love you when I'm at home and when I'm at school. I love you when I'm on holiday, and I love you when it's Eid. And it was lovely, and that was her way of expressing her love, was just through using words. So if we notice that any of our children use words to express love, then we can use that to help them to feel more loved by doing things like verbally encouraging them, telling them they're special, use words of endearment and affection towards them, you know, trying to label the praise when we're talking with them. So I love the colours that you've chosen, would be a really affirming sort of thing to say. You know, using all these encouraging words. So so that's sort of words of affirmation. There was one mum that did this for her daughter, and you can see there she's put a little note in the lunchbox. It says, Lucy, enjoy your day, keep smiling, I love you, mummy, which is really sweet. So the second one was quality time. So demonstrating love by spending time together. So are we really listening to what children say? Are we valuing their comments? Do we spend time with them and enjoy their company? Well, if we recognise that the child's love language is quality time, we can make sure we're planning in specific time to spend with them. We can choose to sit next to them at certain times. We can offer them some one-to-one time. We can share meals together. We can talk to them about their lives. We can make little photo books about times we've spent together. All of these sorts of things will help them to feel loved. Now, the third one they talk about is physical touch. I want to spend a tiny bit more time on this one, because I think this is an area that often educators want a bit more guidance on. So we are in loco parentis, so we care for the children in the place of their parents. And what we're going to do is think about the ways that we might use physical touch to demonstrate our love to our children. So I'm going to paste a link into the chat, and if it doesn't work, Tracy's going to help me with this. That will take you, if you click on it, to a page where you can type words into a box. Okay, so what I want you to do is write words that describe affirming or physical touch. So you can write single words, that's a really helpful thing for me, or a very small phrase. Please don't write a whole sentence. So just write something like hug, or sit on lap, or hold hands, or something. Not full sentences, please, because we are hopefully going to create if I can get there, we're going to create a word storm. So, oops, hold on a second. Right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and then share my screen again for you. Okay, so I can see that some of you are actually managing to do this, so that's great. So now I'll share that with you again, and you'll be able to see what everyone's coming up with, hopefully. Tracy, if it's not there, if you can't see this.
Oh, I think everybody can see that.
Great. So, wow, that's amazing, guys. That's great. Look, we've got, oh, hug's the biggest one. Isn't that nice? So we've got cuddle, hold hands, hug, high five, smiling, snuggly, warmth, cuddling, cozy, love, together, attention, wow, tickle. We'll try and get this. I'll capture this and I'll get Tracy to try and put it on the website for you, so that you can
Absolutely.
this later on. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Mm.
So, loads of different ways that we can actually use physical touch to support the children. You've just come up with loads, so I'm not going to go through my list, but obviously I've also had my own list up just in case you didn't come up with much. But the most important thing to say is that if you work as part of a team, you need to have this discussion together as a team to reflect on what you will and maybe won't do with regard to the children. So there will be a line somewhere you're going to draw in the sand, okay? And it's going to be up to you how you do that. You know, can you kiss their hurts better by actually kissing them? Or are you going to blow a kiss? Or are you going to kiss your hand and, you know, rub it on them? You'll be thinking about all these different things. You know, what about sitting on laps? What about tickling? What about rubbing noses? You know, you've got to think about all these things. This may or may not have changed at the moment because of COVID. Obviously, I appreciate things are a bit tricky at the moment. And everyone does like to give and receive love in different ways. But we also need to bear in mind that not everyone does like to touch or be touched. So we mustn't assume that all children will want to hold our hand or cuddle or want to tickle. But lots and lots of children do need physical contact and touch. There's a wealth of research out there that shows us how important touch is for young children. And of course, being physically tactile with young children can raise safeguarding issues. This is why we need to make sure we've thought about it, we've talked about it as a staff team. We have policies that are underpinning what we actually do in practice. But there was some, just in the news last week, there's a headline there, touch is as important to child development as healthy food. So that's really interesting. Do look up that particular report, which you can find from the Nursery World headlines, if you like. But touch is important because it helps to release oxytocin, which is sometimes nicknamed the love hormone. And this is about helping to reduce the stress hormone, which is cortisol, and helping to make us feel happier. So oxytocin has a positive relationship on a positive impact, sorry, on our health and well-being. So that's really important. And just lastly around touch, keeping children safe, as it says here, should be our highest priority. But we do need to make sure that any worries we have about child protection are complementing our practice, not inhibiting it. So that's a really important point there. So if you do notice that a child craves more touch than others, we use that in our reactions with the children. We make sure we're greeting them with a high five or a hug or something like that. We gain their attention by gently touching their arm. We incorporate games, including physical touch, into our routine. We offer them opportunities for touch throughout the day. Maybe it would be just through having hand lotion rubbed into our hands. Excuse me. And the last love language then was about gifts. Now, this doesn't mean so if you want to spend, that's great. But actually, this is about children feeling loved by sort of receiving things and sometimes giving you things. So you might have a child that perhaps brings you a beautiful flower or a pretty stone or something. And in a way, that's them showing their love to you through giving you a gift. So you can be a resource for a child. You can find that conker, they're collecting conkers, and things like that. So make sure you're holding the child in mind and making resources specifically for them. You can value the things that they're bringing you. You know, put that feather on display. And sorry, that wasn't the last one. The last one is acts of service. So we can demonstrate our love through doing things for people as well. So holding children in mind, planning specific activities that we know they'll love, finding that lost jigsaw piece that they've been looking for, creating special places for them to be in. Sometimes we are trying to encourage our children to be independent, but sometimes they just want us to do things for them. So even if we know they can put their wellies on themselves, sometimes saying, would you like me to help you with that? Then that's fine, isn't it? So if a child's always wanting to help you with things, then maybe they're speaking this language. So what we can do is do things for them, plan to do it, ask them to help you with tasks, respond really sensitively to them. You know, lots of sort of ideas there for you. But this is about knowing the children really well. So thinking about those aspects that relate to their emotional well-being. So what makes them feel calm, excited, anxious? Is there anything they're frightened of? All of these sorts of questions need to focus on the emotional needs of our children. And we should include them in things like our getting to know you, you know, documents and things like that. Okay. So the last few minutes that we're going to cover, I just wanted us to think about, has this changed during COVID-19? So Tracy, do you mind putting the poll up? Is that okay? Just got a poll for you to do. Has your policy on touch changed during COVID-19? So simple yes or no. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. That's really interesting. So it's about 60-40, look, 60-40, there we go. No, and you know, I am so pleased that it's a majority of no. Thank you so much for that. That's absolutely brilliant. So I don't think it should either. So you know, those of you in part of the 40, then obviously if it has, then we deal with it and we get on, don't we? And but I'm really encouraged actually by that. So what we can do, of course, if your policy has changed, then as I say, we will find ways around that. But what we need to be doing is making sure that we're reassuring children that they are still loved. Reading books and stories that include love. I'll show you one in a moment, but my three favourites. While We Can't Hug, you can look that up in a minute. I'm going to show you a picture of that one. The Invisible String and Under the Love Umbrella. Those are my three favourites at the moment. So lots of ideas here of how we can still demonstrate love to children during a pandemic. If you're interested, all of these points are on a handout that's on my Linden Early Years website. So you can find that from the link. Well, I'll show you at the end actually. So So lots of different ideas of how you can still support children during this time. This particular book is absolutely brilliant, and there's a tiny little film that you can watch where it's an animated version of the book. So if you haven't seen that, in fact, what I should, oh no, I'll make sure that while we can't hug, if you just Googled it, there's a YouTube video that goes with it. But I just want us to finish thinking about how actually sometimes children's behaviour can regress at this time. This is not a time for us to actually chastise behaviour or anything like that. This is a time when children need extra reassurance, they need nurture, they need love and understanding. So that's really important at the moment. And sometimes things that we might think are small, our children won't see in that way. We think we've got the big things to worry about, we've got COVID-19 to worry about and so on, but actually for the children it's the little things that make a difference. Like maybe they've got to come into our setting through a different door, maybe they can't sit next to their friend at the moment. These sorts of things will be quite significant to our children. So trying to see the world and our settings through their eyes, so that we can really understand how they feel and what will help them to feel more loved in our settings. So just to finish off with, I'm going to just stop sharing and then just share again in a second, because I've got a really lovely picture at the very end. Right, here we are, I've just found it. So hopefully you can see this again, she said. So looking to the future for the children, this is about us supporting the children. This is about not trying to catch up, have some sort of curriculum catching up, but this is about starting with the child, getting to know the children, thinking about their emotional needs, offering security and safety, practicing empathy, offering additional support if it's needed, clear guidance to the families, and thinking about if all behaviour is communication, well, what are the children and families trying to say to us? So I'm finishing off with, you are making a difference. Developing a loving pedagogy is about an approach where we're putting children first. And so I'm finishing this session where we began. You're making a difference to the children in your care. So thank you for that. And thank you. I think we've got a poll again at the end. Hopefully you learned.
We do. We love polls here at Kimberley. Yeah. I'll launch that in a little while. Thank you, Tamsin. That was really lovely. We had some really, really sweet comments whilst we were presenting, which I'm not sure if you saw, but they really reflected very nicely on your personality and how that comes across in all your work and in your presentation.
Thank you.
So thank you. What a lovely webinar tonight. Thank you. Just looking at some of the questions, we haven't got too many at the moment, but we do have one that says, in my nursery, if a child says, I love you, we were only allowed to say thank you. What might be your opinion on that?
That's really interesting. I have heard that before. I think it's definitely got to be something that you talk about as a staff team, and obviously with senior leaders as well. It will need to be a policy decision. So it might be that the decision that's made is one that isn't what you would personally want to make. I would add to that by saying, thank you, that is such a lovely thing to say to somebody. It's made me feel really happy, or something that makes it clear that to the child that you value them saying that. Other people have said, how would you feel about saying I love you back to me? And I think that's a personal decision, but at the same time needs to fit into your policy and your setting. I have told children I care for, that I love them. That was in a child minding situation. I don't think I did. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I did when I was a reception teacher. To be honest, my brain is not very good at remembering, so I honestly don't know. But I think it's you know, it's partly a personal decision about whether you say that or not. I don't think we should say it if we don't mean it. And I think saying thank you on its own might feel a little cold. I think explaining to the child how happy that's made you feel might be nice.
Yeah. If anybody's got any other suggestions, or there's a couple coming through, the child might be saying, I do say I love them because I do love them. So yeah, there's some nice comments coming through on that question. Somebody, Debbie, saying also depends on how much a parent will allow you to love their child. I think you covered that in terms of your own approach when you thought quite deeply about that question. But she said, I love all mine dearly, which is lovely. Okay, I don't think we've got too many questions coming through. I think I had one. I mean, we took the poll that, 60% are saying that they haven't changed their policy from COVID. Do you think COVID is going to have any long-term effect on professional love? I mean, obviously the short term isn't maybe as dire as it could have been, but do you have any thoughts about the long-term impact?
I think, okay, there's the optimistic answer and there's the not so optimistic answer. I am an optimist by default, I think. I would like to say no. I don't think it's going to have a majorly long-term impact on professional love, because lots of settings that I know that have a loving pedagogy already haven't changed their policies. They are still loving in a physical way, if you like, the children in their care. However, there has been research that's shown us that that many children are being deprived of touch, for example, and that will have a knock-on effect. So not every child, of course, is going to be in one of those settings where the policy hasn't changed. There will be some children in the settings where policies have changed. So I think it would probably not be very accurate of me if I said it definitely won't have a long-term impact, because clearly COVID's going to have a majorly big impact on all of us for a very long time. But does it need to change our loving pedagogy? No, it doesn't need to change our loving pedagogy. We just need to make sure we're very clear about it, what we're doing and why. And the research, I mean, I didn't go into the research much today. My book does. But there is lots of research that backs up how important touch is, and, you know, demonstrating love to young children. So, and you're welcome to contact me and ask me about that if you want to.
I like your optimistic response to that. Thank you. I've got a really interesting question saying, do you have any advice for male practitioners? There's a horrible stigma against male practitioners showing the same kind of professional love. That's a really good question.
That's a brilliant question. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, I think, again, it needs to come from management, and the message should be loud and clear that there is no difference, and that male practitioners should be free to express their love in the same way that female practitioners can. And I think that I'm sorry if you're a male practitioner out there and you don't ever feel supported in that way, that message is getting out, because it's wrong. That, you know, some of the one of the most high profile cases in terms of child protection was about a woman. So there's something about, I don't know, there's some strange ideas that just because you're a man working in early years, there's some sort of risk attached to you. Absolute rubbish. And we need to make sure that at any moment we're countering that and showing the evidence that that a loving relationship is the most important way to go, you know, by any practitioner. Gender, I don't think, should come into it at all.
No.
It does, clearly, and I'm really sorry about that. But again, I've interviewed some male practitioners for my book, and I've sort of tried to address that a little bit. But I think our settings need to be addressing that in their policies as well. So.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tamsin. What about this sort of virtual love? We're having to communicate a lot virtually at the moment. I mean, should we go back into lockdown? What ways can children know that we love them virtually?
Well, I think we can do lots of those love languages virtually.
Yeah.
If you think of 5 love languages, only one of them really involved touch. So, you know, just simply making something for somebody, drawing them a picture, posting it, having a little chat, talking to each other, you know. It'll sound daft, but things like, you know, when we had rainbows everywhere, when we were seeing rainbows in all the windows, I think that was a really practical way of seeing the love, if you see what I mean. So I think there are lots of nice little ways that we can do things like that. And obviously, if there is another lockdown anywhere in the country or nationally, then or around the world, the chances are some settings and schools will remain open for their children, just as they have done before. So I think it's going to be really important that those settings keep everything in terms of having that loving pedagogy, keep all of that sort of in place still. So
nice comments coming through about what people did during lockdown to show that virtual love. So that's nice.
Are we able to capture this at all, Tracy? Like keep some of the comments or?
Yes, I can. We can download the chat afterwards if that's okay. I can anonymise it and just share some of the comments and ideas. I'll do that. Yeah, definitely. It's just come out to 9 o'clock. We just have one last question from Maria that I'd like to ask. She says that I think the 5 languages of saying I love you should be extended to staff. What are your thoughts on that?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant idea, most definitely. I can't remember who it was, I'm so sorry, but I read a blog that somebody had written where they'd actually done that and they thought about it in terms of stuff, and so definitely do. I think it can be extended out of work as well. I think we need to be, you know, spreading the love.
Absolutely, agree with that. Yeah, thank you. So very quickly, I'm just going to launch this last poll about how confident you're feeling now after listening to Tamsin about implementing a loving pedagogy in your setting. And we're seeing a huge difference there, Tamsin. It's 77% are now feeling very confident, 25% feeling quite confident. So that's super news. I hope you, I think that's a job well done, Tamsin, that you've convinced everybody so well and provided so much inspiration. There's a really lovely webinar tonight. Thank you again. And thank you to everybody who's attended tonight. It's always lovely to share all this information and expertise from our presenters, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Just wanted to remind you, if you are just are able to move that slide on, Tamsin, that next week we'll be hearing from the fabulous Aaron Bradbury, who will be talking about diversity, equality and inclusion in the early years and how you can make sure that your settings are diverse and inclusive, and sort of audit your own practice and again reflect on your work. And we're very, very much looking forward to listening to Aaron on that. So I do hope you can join us.
I've booked in already, Tracy.
Perfect. We only have 1,000 spaces on these webinars, so please do join us. For those who aren't familiar with our Facebook group, I've just posted the link in chat. You can join us there, and that's how you can register for all the webinars that we offer on a weekly basis. So please do join us again if you can. It would be lovely to see you. And I hope we'll see Tamsin again very, very soon, because it's always such a pleasure to have her talking with us. So thank you, Tamsin. Have a lovely night, everybody. And
thank you.
We'll see you all again soon then. Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.